Alright, in this section I want to talk about the mental ray sun and sky, and a couple of different techniques for using that and adjusting it. Let's just go ahead and add well, first this is just a basic silly little scene. Has one material applied to it, just a neutral colored material. And what I want to do is just go ahead and add a daylight system. When you do, it's going to ask you if you want to use the photographic exposure control. I'm just going to say yes, because generally you do want to use that unless you're going to be applying your tone mapping outside of 3D Studio Max. And you just click and drag to create that in the viewport. Now, depending on what your 3D Studio Max configuration is, this may come in as a mental ray sun and sky or as a standard object like it did here. If you want it to come in already configured with the mental ray sun and mental ray sky, you can use this custom UI default switcher and pick one of the mental ray load options here, and what it'll do is you can read through. It'll configure the daylight system defaults to the mental ray sun and sky. Your material editor will be populated with A&D materials and things like that. So for me, I'm just going to go ahead and configure this with the mental ray sun and mental ray sky. Now it's going to ask me, it's saying, you're creating a mental ray sky. Do you want to add the physical sky to the environment map? We'll say yes. Now, one thing to remember when you do this is that this mental ray sky and the sky that's in the environment here are two separate animals altogether. These are not this physical sky that's in the environment does not provide illumination into your scene. I'll show that further in a second. What I'll do is just enable Final Gather here, and it's enabled. I'm using the low preset with, I think, 3 bounces. Yeah. And go ahead and give this a render. And so there's the resulting render. It's kind of a flat looking lighting solution, but it's a daylight. You see you have the sun, you have the fill light coming from the sky. If you disable, let's say for example, if I disable the sunlight, you can see just the contribution from the mental ray sky. Likewise, if I disable the skylight, you could just have the illumination from the mental ray sun. Now, as I mentioned, this environment map, the physical sky that's in the environment map, if I drag this over to the material editor, I'm just going to drag this as an instance copy. As you can see, it's currently inheriting its attributes from the mental ray sky. For example, if I disable that and let's say I want the I'm just going to positive value here in the non-physical tuning is where you control the red-blue tint of the sky. Positive values will make it more red, whereas negative values will make it a darker blue. I'm just going to make this sky a different color, and I've got the skylight enabled here, and you'll see that the lighting won't change from this example, but the sky will change colors. So what I'll do is just render this, copy this frame buffer and give it a render. You can see the lighting is the same, but now the sky in the background obviously looks different. So I did that just to show that the skylight or the physical sky that's in the environment does not add to your illumination. It's just strictly a visual representation of the sky. Now, the one time that it will add lighting to your scene is if I was not using this mental ray sky. Instead, if I just use the skylight and I configure the skylight to use the scene environment, well, now what will happen is my lighting will change because I'm using the environment map, which is that mental ray physical sky, for the lighting contribution. So the point being, this mental ray physical sky that's in the environment slot is a separate animal from the mental ray sky that's in the daylight system here. They can be linked together. They are linked together by default as far as looks go, but this does not add lighting to your scene unless you configure it to do so. Okay, so I'm just going to switch this back to inherit from mental ray sky for the discussion on changing the look of the mental ray sky here. And what I'll do, I'll just go ahead and re-enable the sunlight. And in its current state, the mental ray sun is also inheriting its color from the mental ray sky. If I animate this scene, which I'm just going to put it in manual mode, and if I drag this towards the horizon, it will automatically change colors. As you can see, I get a warmer color of the sunlight, whereas before I had more of a neutral colored light when the sun's sort of near noon. If I cancel this render, and let's just move this more towards noontime. Now you can see I have a more neutral colored light. It's also a little bit brighter, it seems, but the multiplier does not change. If you want to manually control the color of the sun, you can do that simply by disabling the inherit from mental ray sky option here. And again, just as I mentioned with the mental ray sky a while ago, you have the option of going positive values or negative values. Positive values will give you a more red color, whereas negative values will turn the a bluish color. And the saturation is obviously the saturation of the color. And the range there is from 0 to 2, the default being 1. So if let's just say I want to move this sun more towards the horizon, and I want a red color, let's say, what I would do is just maybe increase that to, let's say, 0.8 and give that a test. And now you can see we're getting this nice orange color from the sun. And if I wanted to, let me go ahead and enable the sky here in the viewport. Okay. Now, if I wanted to increase that further, I could always increase the saturation. And of course, maybe increase the red-blue tint a little bit more. And as you can see, it's getting a stronger hue to it. Now, one thing that I've noticed is that it's kind of difficult to get a red color out of this daylight system. Often you'll get a nice, it's even pink or even dark reds, bright reds out of the sky and sun at times, and it's rather difficult to do. One thing that to keep in mind is that your exposure control, the Kelvin value here, you could use it, I suppose, to adjust the color of the sun. It's not changing the color of the sun, it's just changing the tone of the actual render. But if I increase this to say 9,000, it's slowly going to turn more reddish in color. But of course, you're losing, as you can see, the sky is not as blue as it was. So the higher I go, the more red that we'll have, but also it will take away from the blue of the sky. So as I increase that, you'll see that happen here. So for me, if I want a really red sunlight, more times than not, what I'll do is just use like a regular light source. So for example, what I would do is let me change back my exposure control back to something like 6500, which is the default value. And what I'll do is add a mental ray spotlight. And just disable the mental ray sun. And just use a red color here. So as you can see, it's not showing up in the view in the render, but it's showing up in the viewport. The reason is that this multiplier of 1.0, I could either increase that to match the intensity of our exposure control and the daylight system, or I could come into the exposure control and put this in unitless, and let's say that this multiplier of 1 is equal to like 90,000 units, which is about the intensity of the sun. If I give that a render, that gives me the red pinkish sunlight that I'm looking for. So again, if you need that red color, I would just recommend going with a like a mental ray spotlight. And I say that over, some people may say that you should use a direct light for the sunlight, and I totally agree. The problem with it is that in mental ray, this direct light, like if I use a target direct, we cannot have area shadows with that. Probably, I guess, if you use shadow maps, you could fake area shadows, but as far as ray trace shadows, you can't. It won't produce area shadows. That's why I have to use this mental ray area spotlight. And area shadows are, of course, just blurry, soft shadows, which are important. So that's why I chose to use the mental ray spotlight. So again, and I would only use that in the event that I wanted a red sunlight color, because I find it difficult to, if not impossible, to produce a nice red color from this mental ray sky, mental ray sun. It does great at all the other colors, as far as the warm colors and the cool colors, but as far as getting a nice red out of it, never been able to do that. So let's get back into looking at these, and so that's how you can control the color of the mental ray sun, and that can be animated. For example, if I just click the auto key here and drag that to 0, that's animating the color, the tint of the sky, of the sunlight itself. So these parameters are animatable. So what I'll do is just enable the inherit from mental ray sky for now, and let's just look at the sky. And what I'll do is turn off the sunlight actually. And what I'm using, I won't get into these other options here. I'm just going to stick with the haze driven, just because I'm kind of limited on my time here. Let's look at changing the look of the mental ray sky. Again, the default value here will just give us a kind of a bluish, neutral looking sky. As you can see, if I decrease, go into a negative value here, you can see how it changes in the viewport. It's going to give you a more blue color. Likewise, if you go with positive values, you get that yellowish colored sky. And of course, you have the saturation here that you can increase or decrease to get more of a grayish looking sky. For example, if I wanted a gray sky, obviously I would set the red blue tint to 0, the saturation to 0. And there it produces more of a neutral colored light. me set that back to the default of 1. You also have this haze function, which just adds a colored haze to the sky here. As you see, as I increase that, it's bringing up, almost looks like it's bringing the horizon up a little bit. And obviously the multiplier is the intensity of the sky. Of course, generally speaking, you'll want to leave this near the default value, and if you want your scene brighter, then instead of increasing these multipliers, you just change your exposure control. For example, if I just decrease this to something like 13, then that's going to increase the intensity or the brightness of this entire render. Let me just decrease that a bit further. So as you can see, that made the scene, the image, a bit brighter. So that's the best way to control the intensity rather than changing these multipliers. And also, while I'm looking at this exposure control, of course you can change the look of the render by using these controls here on your exposure control. Let me just re-enable this mental ray sun. And what I want to do is just get some nice contrasty light scenario here. So what I'll do is increase, say, the red-blue tint, set that to something like 0.5, leave the saturation at 0.8. The red-blue tint I'll just leave on the mental ray sky. I'll just leave that at the default values and give this a render. So taking the exposure control here, if I want more contrast in this scene, then what I could do is decrease the midtone value here, something like 0.75. You can enable vignetting, which will darken the edges of the image here. If I wanted these highlights to be a little bit brighter, naturally I would just increase the highlights and burn setting. Same with the shadows. If I wanted the shadows to be darker, I would increase that, but I don't think I want those to be darker. I could increase the color saturation. And so then you can end up with this a lot of contrast in your images. One thing that I forgot to mention on the mental ray sun, if you notice the shadows here on this container are kind of grainy looking. You can remove that, of course. There's under the shadows here, I can make the shadows softer by increasing this value, and I can of course clear up the grain in the shadows here by increasing the samples. Naturally, when you increase samples, you're going to increase your render time as well, so you don't want to go too crazy with this number. But also, as the sun gets lower in the sky towards the horizon, I generally like to increase the softness value, and again, I'll normally animate that parameter. Okay, so what if you wanted a different environment? What if you wanted to use clouds here or something else other than this clear sky in the background? Well, all you would need to do is open the environment tab here and just replace. You can either replace this physical sky or you can add a map to it. For now, I'm just going to and just again, it's already here, but just for sake of consistency, just drag that over to the material editor. Tell it to disable this inherit from mental ray sky. You can use the haze slot here, but what I'll do is if I'm wanting clouds in the sky, generally what I'll do is just replace this physical sky with a map of the sky itself, because if you add a bitmap here to do the clouds along with the mental ray sky, what it's going to do is actually going to tint that. The only time that it becomes clear is when the sun is near noon. So let's go ahead and just add a sky map here. And so what I have are a couple of panoramic images that I've created with View, and I'll just load this, and I've saved them out in HDR format. What I'll do is just load that in, and I'm going to use RealPixel's 32-bit format with the default exposure options. And of course, the environment is spherical here, and just give that a render. And actually what I meant to do was place this in this custom background map. I'm sorry. Let me just swap that and enable this use custom background map. If I click render, then what you should see is the that HDR in the background. And so there we have the cloud image here being used in the environment. Now what I was saying about it being tinted is if you use this haze slot and you put, say, a black and white image of clouds in there, then that gets tinted. You'll have this yellowish hue to it, except when the sun is up near noon, and then it'll turn more white. So generally, if I want clouds in the background, I'll either just use a cloud map here instead of the Mental Ray physical sky, or just use it as I did here in this custom background map. That's basically the same thing as just replacing this. But either way, I generally don't like to use the haze slot method just because of the way that it tints the color of the clouds. Now, getting back to what I had mentioned before, is what if I want to actually illuminate the scene using this cloud map instead of the physical sky? Then what I could do is just go into my daylight system here and change it from Mental Ray Sky over to Skylight like I did before, and of course have it use the scene environment. And I'll just turn off the sunlight system here just so that we can see the contribution from the skylight itself. Alright, now if you notice, the colors here, they don't really match the color of the sky. So what's happening is that it's not really picking up the color from this background map. It's just showing this as a background map. For example, if I go into the environment map, and let's just take this HDR over as an instance, and instance this over to replace the physical sky. And I'll just make a copy of this frame buffer. Actually, I'll load it into the RAM player. And give this a render again. Okay, now you can see we're picking up colors from the sky itself. So if I add this in to the RAM player, you can see the different results that you get because, again, if you use the physical sky in the environment and just use a custom map, it's still going to use the sky settings here to illuminate your scene. It will not illuminate the scene off of the this custom background map. To do that, you actually have to add it to your environment. And of course, since I'm using this HDR in the environment, if I wanted to rotate, you can actually animate this and kind of give the illusion of movement here. But you can rotate this around to find the view that you're looking for. And if I want, say, the sunlight here, something like so, don't forget that you'd also want to move the daylight system in a similar fashion, and go in and enable the sunlight because it's difficult to get sharp shadows out of an HDR environment when using Final Gather. So generally what I like to do is use it in conjunction with a normal light source such as the Mental Ray Sun here. So just give that a render. And so that's how you can use an HDR or even a JPEG, whatever environment map that you wanted to use there, instead of using the mental ray sun. Quick note about the exposure control here. Remember how I had changed this to 90,000. If left at the default of this physical units, and I give this a render, the background will turn up black actually. The reason for that is that this map is just not strong enough with the exposure control settings that I'm using to show up. So by changing the exposure control setting, this physical scale, I'm making that background have enough energy to be seen here in the render. Another method that people use is that you can increase the output. Instead of changing this, you can leave it at physical scale and then just increase the output amounts here on the map itself, on the HDR map. But as you can see, it blows out in the viewport and also in the material editor, and I just find it useful to have it actually in the viewport so that I can see the placement. So that's why I prefer to use the method here of changing the physical scale so that it shows up. And naturally, it's easy to change the look of your scene when you're using these HDRs. Let me just pick a different one here. And I keep saying HDRs. It doesn't have to be an HDR. It could be a JPEG. Just whatever that you're using to illuminate the scene with. And finally, if you notice this line that I'm getting here at the horizon, that's due to here on the daylight system, there's an option for well, this is the line that I'm referring to. It didn't show up very well because actually didn't show up at all because I had it set up to use the skylight instead of the mental ray sky. But if you're using the mental ray sky, you can see how you get this haze on the horizon, and the reason for that is this aerial perspective. If you disable that, then that will remove this haze that you often get when you try to use a bitmap in your environment. So as you can see, it took out that orange haze from here. The line that you're seeing here is actually just the map itself. As you can see, it's just got a harsh line in the horizon. So that concludes the discussion on the mental ray sun and sky and adjusting it using HDR with it. I talked a little more in depth on the other workshop that I have here about using HDRs to illuminate your scene. So I went through this kind of quick, but that's really all there is to it. And don't forget that your exposure control settings, you can tune these to also affect the contrast and color that you see in your renders.